She snapped at me right in front of her buddies. She said, "You cannot even satisfy me, much less provide for me." I just smiled, paid the bill for my own food, and walked out the door. That same night, she showed up at my place crying, but my new girl was the one who opened the door. Hey there, folks. I just wanted to give a quick thank you. Over 14% of you are already subscribed, and it really means the world to me. Alright, so I know how this sounds, but please bear with me because this whole situation is absolutely wild. My ex-girlfriend, Jessica, and I dated for roughly 8 months. I am 31 years old, and she is 28. Things started off really good, but during the last few months, she had been getting more and more demanding about money and making snide comments about my lifestyle. I work as a plumber and I own my own business. I make really good money, actually. But Jessica always acted weird when people asked what I do for a living. She works full-time as a manager at some high-end boutique downtown. So, she is around fancy stuff all day long. We have been living together for about 4 months in my house, which I own free and clear. However, lately, Jessica has been dropping hints about moving to a bigger place or a better neighborhood. She would say, "Everyone at work lives in those new downtown condos, Jake. They are so much nicer than this place." I told her, "Babe, this house is paid off. Why in the world would we move somewhere where we would have to pay rent?" She answered, "Because it is about more than just money. It is about lifestyle." The issues really got bad when she started hanging out with this group of girls from her job. All of them were dating guys with office jobs. Suddenly, Jessica is acting embarrassed about being with a plumber. She asked me, "Why can you not get a normal job like everyone else?" I told her, "Jessica, I own my own business. I make more money than most people do." She replied, "It is not about money. It is about what people think." I should have ended the relationship right there, but I thought she would eventually get over it. Last Friday, Jessica sends me a text saying she wants to go to this new high-end restaurant downtown. You know, the kind of place that charges $40 for a steak. I said, "Sure, even though it is not really my scene." She said, "Great. I invited Brittany and Courtney from work and their boyfriends. You will finally get to meet them." That was a red flag, but I went along with it anyway. Saturday night rolls around, and we meet at the restaurant. Brittany and Courtney show up with their guys, who are exactly what you would expect. They are wearing button-down shirts and talking about their marketing jobs and investment portfolios. Brittany says, "This is my boyfriend, Todd. He works in digital marketing." Then Courtney adds in, "And this is Chad. He is in corporate finance." Then, it is my turn. Jessica says without much enthusiasm, "This is my boyfriend, Jake. He owns a maintenance company." She said maintenance company, not plumbing business. A maintenance company. The whole dinner is awkward. Todd and Chad keep talking about their careers and asking vague questions about what I do. Jessica keeps steering the conversation away whenever they get specific. When Chad asked directly, she said, "Jake handles property maintenance for commercial buildings." Which is sort of true, but she makes it sound like I am a janitor instead of a business owner. About halfway through dinner, Todd starts talking about this vacation he is planning with Brittany. He says, "We are looking at Bermuda for a long weekend. We want to get an all-inclusive resort package." Jessica says, "That sounds incredible. Jake and I never do anything like that." I looked at her, totally confused. I said, "We talked about taking a trip to Costa Rica. You said you wanted to wait until summer." She said, "That is different. That is not like a real vacation." I asked, "What makes a vacation real?" She replied, "You know, like somewhere romantic with nice resorts and good service." I said, "Costa Rica has nice resorts." "It is not the same thing, Jake," Brittany jumps in. "Todd surprised me with the trip for our 6-month anniversary. It is so nice having someone who knows how to treat you, right?" The comment just hangs in the air. I can see exactly where this is going. Jessica looks directly at me and says, "Must be nice." Courtney decides to pile on, too. She says, Chad and I went to Napa last month. Wine country is so romantic. It is much better than camping or whatever. See, that is what I am talking about, Jessica says. Some people know how to plan real dates. I replied, Jessica, we have been on plenty of nice dates. She asked, like what? I listed them off. That weekend at the lake house, the concert downtown, and dinner at that Italian place last month. She looked at me and said, those things are not the same at all. I asked her, how are they different? She said, because they are not impressive. They are just average. Todd and Chad are watching this conversation happen like it is some form of entertainment. Brittany and Courtney are exchanging looks with each other. I said, Jessica, maybe we should talk about this back at the house. She snapped back, no, let us talk about it right now. I am tired of pretending that everything is fine. I asked, pretending that what is fine? She said, our relationship, Jake. Our future. I asked, what is wrong with our future? She replied, what future? You are content just running a little maintenance business forever. I told her, it is not a little business. It is successful. She asked, successful compared to what? I said, compared to most businesses. I do well. She said, define well. I am getting irritated now. I said, I make good money, Jessica. You know this. She asked, how good? I answered, good enough to own a house and support both of us. She said, that is not what I asked. The table goes completely quiet. Everyone is staring at us. I asked, Jessica, what do you want me to say? She said, I want you to be honest about your limitations. I asked, what limitations? She replied, your career limitations, Jake. Your ambition limitations. I told her, I do not have limitations. I have a successful business. Jessica looks around the table at her friends, and then she looks back at me. She said, Jake, you cannot even satisfy me, much less provide for me. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Brittany and Courtney gasp. Todd and Chad look uncomfortable, but they also look kind of interested. I said, Jessica, what the hell? She said, it is true, Jake. You are not ambitious. You are not sophisticated. You are just comfortable being small time. I asked, small time? She said, yes, small time. Look at Todd and Chad. They have real careers. They understand what women want. I asked, and what do women want? She replied, success, growth, someone who is going somewhere in life. I sat there for a second just processing what had just happened. My girlfriend of 8 months, who lives inside my house, just told me I cannot provide for her right in front of strangers I have never even met before. Then, I started laughing. Jessica asks, what is so funny? I asked her, you think Todd and Chad are more successful than me? She said, they have real careers, Jake. I turned to the guy and asked, Todd, you work in digital marketing, right? He said, yeah. Why? I asked, what is your annual income, if you do not mind me asking? Jessica warns me, Jake, do not do this. Todd says, I make about $70,000. I said, that is great. Chad, what about you? Chad replied, around 85,000. I said, cool. So, Jessica, since you think I cannot provide for you, do you want to know what I made last year? She said, Jake, stop this. I said, $160,000. The table goes dead silent. Courtney says, that is impossible. I said, nope. The plumbing business is really good. Emergency calls, commercial contracts, and new construction. I am booked 6 months out. Brittany looks shocked. She said, you make twice what Todd makes. I said, yeah, but apparently that does not matter because it is not sophisticated enough. Jessica has a face that is bright red. She mumbles, money is not everything. I said, you literally just said I cannot provide for me. It seems like money was pretty important 10 seconds ago. She said, it is not about the money. It is about image. I asked, image? She said, yes. Image. What am I supposed to tell people when they ask what my boyfriend does? I said, you tell them your boyfriend owns a successful plumbing company and makes 6 figures. She said, it is not the same thing. I replied, you are right. It is better because it is real success, not just a fancy title. I signaled the waiter to come over. I asked, can I get the check, please? Jessica asked, Jake, what are you doing? I said, I am paying for my dinner and I am leaving. She said, you cannot just leave. I replied, watch me. The waiter brings the check. It is $150 for 6 people. I look at it and calculate my portion. 2 drinks and the salmon, so it is about $35 including the tip. Jessica says quietly, Jake, you always pay when we go out. I told her, you just told me I cannot provide for you. I figured I should stop trying. I put $40 on the table and stand up. I said, thanks for dinner, everyone. Good luck paying for the rest. She said, Jake, sit down. Do not make a scene. I said, I am not making a scene. I am leaving. You can figure out how to split the rest with your sophisticated friends. I walked out of that restaurant feeling like I had just dodged a bullet. I got home and sat on my couch thinking about what just happened. Jessica had been living in my house for 4 months, eating food I paid for, and sleeping in a bed I bought, and she just told strangers I could not provide for her. My phone started buzzing around 11 o'clock at night. I had texts from Jessica. She wrote, Jake, I am sorry. I did not mean what I said. Brittany had to lend me money for my part of dinner. Can you Venmo me back? Then she wrote, Jake, please answer me. I am getting an Uber home. She sent a text saying, we need to talk. I did not respond to any of her messages. She got back to the house around midnight and tried to speak with me, but I just went straight to my bedroom and locked the door. By Sunday morning, she was gone when I woke up. She left a note saying she was going to stay at Brittany's place for a few days while I cooled off. On Sunday afternoon, I was over at the hardware store picking up some supplies when I ran into this girl named Sarah from high school. We had been friends back in the day, but we lost touch after graduation. She said, Jake, oh my gosh, how are you? I said, hey Sarah, I am good. What are you up to these days? She told me, I just moved back to town last month. I got a job at the hospital working as a nurse. We stood in the parking lot and talked for about an hour just catching up on things. Sarah was smart, funny, and down to earth. She was the complete opposite of Jessica. She said, we should grab a cup of coffee sometime. I replied, I would like that. We exchanged phone numbers and made plans for Tuesday. On Monday, Jessica came by the house while I was at work and packed up more of her belongings. She left another note saying she needed time to think about us. On Tuesday, I had coffee with Sarah. We talked for 3 hours about everything. We discussed work, family, goals, and dreams. She was actually impressed that I owned my own business. She said, that is amazing, Jake. Starting your own company takes real guts. I said, thanks. It has been good to me. She said, I bet it has. Plus, you are helping people. When my bathroom flooded last year, I would have paid anything to get it fixed fast. It was a completely different reaction than the one Jessica always gave me. On Wednesday, Sarah came over to my place for dinner. I grilled some burgers and we watched a movie. She absolutely loved my house. She said, Jake, this place is beautiful. You own this whole house. I said, yeah, I bought it 3 years ago. She said, that is incredible. Most people our age are still renting apartments. I told her, that is one of the benefits of getting into business early. On Thursday, Jessica texted me asking if we could meet up to talk. I ignored it. On Friday, she called my mother. They had met a few times when we were dating, so Jessica had her number. My mom called me later on. Laughing. She said, Jake, some girl called me crying about how she made a mistake and needs you back. I asked, what did you tell her? Mom said, I told her if she was dumb enough to be embarrassed about a man who owns his own house and business, she deserved what she got. I said, Mom, you did not say that. She replied, I sure did. Then I told her, you were raised better than to chase after people who do not appreciate you. On Saturday night, Sarah and I went out to a nice restaurant. It was a real date this time. She looked amazing and we had a great time. It was just natural conversation with no complaints about money or social status. She asked, Jake, can I ask you something? I said, sure. She asked, what happened with your last relationship? You mentioned you recently got out of something. I told her, she was embarrassed about my job. She thought dating a plumber was beneath her. Sarah said, that is crazy. You are successful and you work hard. What more could someone want? I said, apparently, a corporate job in an office. She said, that is her loss. Then, when I dropped Sarah off at her place, she kissed me goodnight. It was the first time I had felt genuinely excited about someone in months. The next Friday, exactly 1 week after the restaurant disaster, I was working in my garage when my doorbell rang. I expected it to be Sarah because we had made plans to watch a movie. I opened the door and there was Jessica standing there crying with 2 suitcases. She said, Jake, thank God you are home. I have been thinking all week and I know I can fix this. I asked, Jessica, what are you doing here? She said, I am here to apologize and move back in. I realize I was completely wrong. I said, you cannot just move back in. She pleaded, Jake, please just listen. I talked to Brittany and Courtney and they both said I was crazy for saying what I said. I looked at her and asked, so, your friends had to tell you that you messed up? She said, that is not the point. I replied, that is exactly the point. Jessica, I know I screwed up, but we can work through this. I told her, there is nothing to work through. She insisted, yes, there is. I love you. I said, you love me now that your friends told you I make good money. She said, that is not true. Before I could say anything else, another car pulled into my driveway. It was Sarah getting out with bags of takeout food and a bottle of wine. Jessica turned around and saw Sarah walking up the path. She asked, who is that? I said, that is Sarah. She asked, Sarah who? I answered, my girlfriend. Jessica's face went completely white. She asked, your girlfriend? I said, yeah, we have been seeing each other. She asked, for how long? I said, about a week. Sarah reached the door looking confused about why Jessica was standing there crying on my doorstep. She said, hey babe, and gave me a quick kiss. She added, I brought Thai food. Is everything okay? I said, everything is fine. Jessica was just leaving. Jessica snapped, I was not just leaving. Jake, we lived together. I reminded her, you moved out, remember? She said, you needed time to think. I did not say I was moving out permanently. I told her, you packed your stuff and you left. That is moving out. Sarah stepped forward and said, hi, I am Sarah. I do not think we have met. Jessica said, I am Jessica, Jake's girlfriend. I corrected her immediately. Ex-girlfriend. She pleaded, Jake, tell her we are working things out. I said, we are not working anything out, Jessica. She said, I am not leaving until we fix this. I told her, there is nothing to fix. You showed me what you really think of me. Sarah looked between us and then looked at me. She asked, Jake, should I come back later? I said, no, you should stay. Jessica should go. Jessica said, this is unbelievable. You are replacing me already. I said, I am not replacing anybody. I am moving forward with someone who respects what I do. She said, Jake, I respect you. I replied, you respect me now that you found out I make more money than your friends' boyfriends. She said, that is not why. I told her, that is exactly why. You were fine disrespecting me until you realized you looked stupid. Sarah's eyes widened. She asked, she disrespected your job? Jessica said, among other things. Jake, I was wrong. I admit it. I said, Jessica, you were not wrong. You were honest. You showed me who you really are. She stood there crying with her suitcases for another minute, then finally loaded them back into her car and drove away. Sarah and I went inside and she asked what that was all about. I told her the whole story. Her reaction was perfect. She said, Jake, she sounds awful. Who says something like that about someone they supposedly love? I asked, someone who cares more about what other people think than about reality. She said, well, I think what you do is impressive. You built something from nothing. That was 6 weeks ago. Sarah and I are official now and things are amazing. She is proud to tell people I own my own business and she never makes me feel like I need to apologize for my success. Jessica tried calling a few more times, but I blocked her number. Brittany reached out once to say that most people at their work thought Jessica was out of line at that dinner. Last week, I ran into Todd at the gas station. He seemed embarrassed but he came over anyway. He said, Jake. I said, hey man. He said, look, about that dinner. Do not worry about it. I said, nah, I feel bad. Jessica was really harsh and honestly, I was impressed when you told us what you make. I said, thanks. He added, for what it is worth, she has been pretty miserable since you guys broke up. She keeps asking Brittany about you. I said, that is unfortunate. He said, she moved back in with her parents. Apparently, she could not afford her own place without your help. So, Jessica went from living in my paid-off house to moving back home with her folks. It is interesting how that worked out. The whole thing taught me that some people care more about appearances than substance. Jessica wanted a boyfriend who looked impressive on paper, even if he could not provide what I could. She got so caught up in what her coworkers thought that she threw away financial security for social status. Now she is back at her parents' house while I am with someone who appreciates what I have built. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the consequences of their own choices.